They say time heals all wounds, but what if time was never given the chance? The night she left, the clock on the kitchen wall didn't just tick. It accused. Daniel stared at the half-empty mug on the table, her lipstick still perfect on its rim as if she'd planned to come back for it. But she didn't. Claire's silence became a storm inside him. 7 days. That's all it took for her to move on. 7 days for her to smile beside another man. Have you ever loved someone so deeply that watching them forget you felt like watching yourself disappear? The ache wasn't jealousy. It was disbelief. And yet, beneath that disbelief, a slow, terrifying question took root. Who was he? The answer would not only break Daniel's heart, it would change everything he thought he knew about love, loyalty, and the truth that had been buried in their marriage all along. Morning brought no relief, only the cruel honesty of daylight. Daniel sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the imprint her body left in the sheets. It wasn't just absence he felt. It was betrayal, dressed as peace. Claire's laughter, once the sound of home, now echoed through another man's feed. His name was still unknown, a shadow in the corner of every photo. Daniel couldn't decide if he wanted to forget her or understand her. But one thing was certain. He needed to know who that man was. By afternoon, Daniel drove through the rain, the city passing in smeared reflections on the windshield. Every traffic light felt like a question. Why wasn't she enough for him, or he for her? He found himself outside a cafe she used to love. Her laughter still lived there, ghost-like, hidden between coffee cups and memories. And then, there she was. Not in person, but in another new post. Her hand, the same delicate wristwatch. And beside her, the man's face finally revealed. The name hit harder than the image. Richard. Daniel whispered it aloud, the sound foreign on his tongue. Richard was his best friend. The man who had stood beside him at his wedding. The man who knew every fault line in his marriage. A betrayal, this intimate, didn't just cut. It hollowed. Daniel's anger began to shift, not toward Claire, but toward the one man who had promised never to cross that line. The night deepened, and so did Daniel's resolve. Pain had become his map. Betrayal, his compass. He didn't want revenge. Not yet. He wanted understanding. Somewhere between heartbreak and revelation, a truth was waiting to be found. But as he replayed every conversation, every secret laugh shared between Claire and Richard, one memory refused to fade. One that hinted this wasn't just an affair. It was something far deeper. The next morning began like a lie he had to keep repeating. Daniel stared at the reflection in his bathroom mirror, unsure whether he saw a man broken or a man reborn in anger. He replayed the name Richard until it no longer sounded human. How long had it been happening right under his nose? Their dinners, their inside jokes, those glances he'd dismissed as harmless familiarity, all now felt rehearsed. Still, beneath the rising fury, a haunting question gnawed at him. Why did she just tell me the truth? Sometimes betrayal doesn't start with a kiss. It begins with silence. Daniel's hands shook as he typed Richard's name into his phone, scrolling through years of friendship reduced to digital snapshots, birthdays, barbecues, laughter. There they all were, the perfect trio. Claire's hand on Richard's shoulder, his arm casually resting on the back of Daniel's chair. Now, every image felt like a warning he had ignored. He paused on one from 2 years ago. Claire's eyes weren't looking at him at all. They were looking at Richard. That evening, Daniel found himself parked outside Richard's apartment. The city hummed around him, unaware of the storm in his chest. He imagined walking up those stairs, demanding answers, breaking the polite facade that had trapped them all. But something stopped him. The light in Richard's window. He saw movement. 2 silhouettes. Her shape unmistakable. The ache in his throat turned into a whisper that no one could hear. She's really there. He didn't confront them that night. Instead, Daniel drove until dawn, letting the highway unwind his thoughts. Somewhere between exhaustion and disbelief, he remembered something Claire once said. Some truths need to stay hidden to protect what's left. Maybe that's what she thought she was doing. But truth has a way of clawing out from beneath the lies, no matter how deep you bury it. By the time he returned home, Daniel was no longer the man who begged for answers. He was the man ready to find them. He searched through old emails, files, messages, anything that could make sense of it all. But the truth he uncovered wasn't the one he expected. Richard wasn't just another man in Claire's life. He'd been there long before Daniel met her, connected in ways Daniel had never imagined. This wasn't just infidelity. It was history rewriting itself before his eyes. The discovery left Daniel frozen, his heart beating louder than the rain outside. The emails were dated months before he even met Claire. Messages filled with confessions, promises, and a single phrase that shattered everything. Well, tell him when the time is right. She and Richard had a past. One she never had a past. Told him about. It wasn't a fling. It was love before the vows. Unfinished business dressed as friendship. Every moment he thought he owned in their marriage now belonged to a story that started long before him. He printed the emails, reading them like chapters from a book he was never supposed to find. I'll always come back to you, Claire had written. Even if it takes years. Daniel's throat tightened. The woman he'd married hadn't really moved on in 7 days. She'd just gone back to where she'd once belonged. Love, it seemed, didn't die in her. It only paused, and he had been the intermission. Daniel drove to his parents' old cabin, the one Claire never liked visiting. He needed silence, not answers. The forest surrounded him with the same stillness she once called. Too lonely. But loneliness, he realized, was honest. He opened his laptop and reread her first email to Richard. Her tone wasn't flirtatious. It was desperate. He reminds me of you, she had written. Daniel closed the screen. The pieces were aligning into something far more painful. He had been her second attempt at the same love. That night, he lit a fire in the cabin hearth. Flames flickered across old photographs. Claire smiling, Richard standing beside her, both younger, untouched by guilt. He wondered how many lies were born from good intentions. Did she ever love him the way he loved her? Or was he just a safer version of the man she truly wanted? The sound of burning paper filled the silence with truth. Some love stories don't end. They just change owners. As the night deepened, Daniel found a final letter in the box. A handwritten note addressed to my unfinished chapter. It was Claire's handwriting. Inside, she confessed that she had tried to build a future without Richard, but her heart kept circling back. If you were reading this, she wrote, it means I couldn't outrun the truth anymore. Daniel folded the letter gently, tears blurring the words. The pain was no longer just betrayal. It was mourning the ghost of a love that was never his to begin with. Morning arrived like a confession Daniel didn't ask for. Smoke lingered in the cabin's rafters, a ghost of what he'd burned the night before. He didn't sleep. His mind kept replaying every word of Claire's letter. If you were reading this, it means I couldn't outrun the truth anymore. What truth was she talking about? Was Richard the destination, or the reason she ever left him at all? Some answers feel heavier than lies. With shaking hands, Daniel started the car. He was done wondering. It was time to look the past in the eyes. The city felt foreign now. Colder, like it had kept secrets from him too. Daniel parked outside Richard's office building, watching people hurry past with lives unbroken. Inside those glass walls, the man who'd betrayed him sat behind polished desks and practiced smiles. For years, Richard had been his brother in everything but blood. Now Daniel wondered how long that brotherhood had been a lie. When Richard finally appeared, adjusting his tie, laughing with a coworker, Daniel realized he didn't want to fight. He wanted the truth, clean and undeniable. Daniel followed him quietly to a nearby cafe, the same one where Claire had once spent her Sunday mornings. The irony felt cruel. He waited until Richard sat down alone, then walked in. Their eyes met, and for the first time, Richard didn't smile. No words were needed. The truth was already written across both their faces. Daniel sat down. Silence filled the space between them, like static. "You should have told me," Daniel said finally. Richard's shoulders sank, his voice barely a whisper. "I tried." Richard's confession came out like shattered glass. Slow, sharp, unstoppable. He told Daniel that Claire and he had been together once, years before the marriage. She left him because she wanted something new, something clean. When she met Daniel, Richard thought it was fate playing tricks. "I stayed close," he admitted, "because I couldn't let go." Daniel sat motionless. Love, he realized, can be cruelly circular. People leaving, returning, colliding, as if destiny itself were addicted to pain. When Daniel stood to leave, Richard reached out. "She didn't mean to hurt you," he said. "She just couldn't forget." Daniel paused by the door, his voice steady but hollow. "Neither could you." The bell above the cafe door chimed softly as he walked out. For the first time, Daniel didn't feel anger, only clarity. The story wasn't about betrayal anymore. It was about unfinished hearts colliding in the wrong lifetime. But still, one question echoed louder than all. If she truly loved Richard, why marry me at all? For days, Daniel lived in the echo of that question. Every memory felt like a riddle now. He replayed their wedding video, her smile, her vows, the way she looked at him like he was home. Maybe she believed it then. Maybe she wanted to believe it. Sometimes people build love out of guilt, not passion. And when the guilt fades, so does the love. Still, Daniel needed to hear her truth. Not in messages, not in letters. From her lips. Only then would he be free. Reshore. He texted Claire a simple message. "We need to talk." Hours passed. Evening melted into night. Finally, a reply. "Tomorrow, noon." The park. The same park where they'd once planned their future beneath a chestnut tree. As he read the message, Daniel felt his heart race. Not with hope, but with fear of what the truth might take away. He wasn't sure if he wanted closure or a miracle. The next day, the park was quiet, wrapped in the stillness of early afternoon. Daniel saw her before she saw him, Claire, sitting on the same bench where they once shared ice cream and promises. Time hadn't changed her much, but her eyes carried new weight. She smiled softly, as if they were just old friends meeting again. "You look tired," she said. He laughed once, bitterly. "You look like you're doing fine." For a moment, neither spoke. Then Daniel whispered, "Why me, Claire? Why marry me if your heart was with him?" Claire's eyes filled before words did. "Because you were safe," she said finally. "You made me believe I could start over." Her voice trembled, honest but cruel. "But I never stopped feeling what I felt for him. I tried, Daniel. I swear I tried." He wanted to scream, to run, but instead, he sat beside her. "You should be told me," he said quietly. "Maybe I would have loved you differently." For the first time, she turned toward him and said, "That's exactly what I was afraid of." As the wind rustled the trees, Daniel realized something he hadn't before. She hadn't come to justify herself. She'd come to release him. "I loved you," Claire said, her voice breaking, "but not the way you deserved." He nodded slowly, the anger dissolving into quiet understanding. Sometimes forgiveness doesn't come with words. It arrives with silence. When she stood to leave, Daniel didn't stop her. For the first time since she left, he didn't need to. The truth had hurt, but it had also healed. That night, Daniel walked home under a sky heavy with clouds, yet his chest felt lighter than it had in months. The truth had hurt, yes, but it had also set him free. He replayed Claire's words again and again. "I loved you, but not the way you deserved." It wasn't cruelty, it was confession. For the first time, Daniel realized that maybe she wasn't the villain. Maybe neither of them were. Sometimes love simply arrives as not a destination. The following morning, sunlight filled the apartment like forgiveness. Daniel brewed coffee for one. No bitterness, no ghosts. He noticed the small things again. The hum of the kettle, the sound of birds, the soft clink of his spoon against the mug. Healing, he realized, wasn't a thunderclap. It was a whisper that slowly replaced the noise of grief. Later, Daniel sat by the window and began to write. Not to Claire, not to Richard, to himself. A letter about letting go, about forgiving the love that wasn't meant to stay. Words flowed easily, not from pain anymore, but from peace. "You did your best," he wrote. In the days that followed, Daniel returned to the small things that once made him feel alive. The guitar gathering dust in the corner. The morning jogs head abandoned. The quiet joy of reading in bed. Each act was a conversation with himself, a reminder that life continues after heartbreak, that love lost is not life lost. Slowly, the ache became gratitude. Weeks later, Daniel walked through the same park where everything had ended. The chestnut tree stood unchanged, its branches whispering in the wind. He sat on the same bench, this time smiling faintly. It wasn't the place of goodbye anymore. It had become a symbol of how far he'd come. The past no longer hurt. It simply existed. He whispered to the wind, "Thank you." Not to Claire, not to Richard, but to life itself, for teaching him that endings, too, can be beginnings. Months had passed, and life had begun to settle into a rhythm Daniel didn't expect. Mornings no longer carried the weight of betrayal. Evenings were no longer haunted by unanswered questions. He had rebuilt himself from the fragments of heartbreak, shaping a man who could remember love without being chained to it. The past existed, but it no longer ruled him. Daniel realized that survival wasn't enough. He had to live fully. One evening, Daniel met someone new. Clara. Not a replacement, not a mirror of Claire, but someone whose presence felt like a quiet promise. Their conversations were easy, laughter effortless. He noticed details he'd ignored before. The curve of her smile, the warmth in her voice, the gentleness of her hands. Life had given him a second chance, not to forget, but to love again with clarity and courage. As the weeks passed, Daniel found joy in ordinary things. Morning coffee no longer tasted bitter. Rain no longer felt oppressive. Music played again in his apartment, filling corners that had once echoed with emptiness. He realized happiness was quiet, subtle, and built in fragments, not sudden or overwhelming, but steady and true. One evening, Daniel returned to the chestnut tree in the park. This time, he didn't sit to mourn or question. He sat to reflect, smiling faintly as he remembered the journey, the betrayal, the heartbreak, the discovery, and the forgiveness. Every scar had a lesson. Every tear had a purpose, and every ending had led him here, to a place where he could finally breathe without pain. The future stretched ahead, unknown but promising. Daniel stood beneath the park's open sky, Claire by his side. He no longer feared love, betrayal, or loss. He only felt gratitude for the lessons, the pain, and the strength that had carried him here. As he breathed in the crisp evening air, he realized that endings were not finales. They were doorways, and this doorway led to a life renewed, open, and waiting to be lived fully.